Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the post show here at Connections, where we kind of debrief the service, kind of wrap things up.
Yep.
I mean, we have a pre-show. We need a post-show.
You have to have a post show.
Yeah. Dave,
Absolutely.
What post-show is this? What number?
This is post show number 749.
Yeah, it is.
I have absolutely no idea what number post show this is, but
You were probably close.
I don't think so,
Give or take
because that would be
700.
like 3 years or 2 years worth of post shows. Probably not quite that far.
Probably
No.
actually a little more because
Yep.
there's only like 52 weeks in a year.
Exactly. Exactly. So, how was everyone's Christmas celebration?
It's good.
Did you have a good Christmas?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anything out of the usual?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. No.
I got no presents. I was bad this year.
No presents?
presents.
Not coal
On the
again
naughty
this
list.
year?
I know, again.
I hear you have quite the coal collection, though.
I do.
Yeah, that's nice.
It's
pretty
If
valuable,
you ever need any.
actually.
No.
You've got plenty?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
How was your Christmas day?
My Christmas was fantastic. We didn't do anything Christmas Day, but the day after, my daughter was here from Colorado. All of my family that lives around here, we all got together here at church, and we had just had a big party. We had a lot of fun.
Wow.
So it was fun.
I love that.
Nice.
Very fun. Yep, absolutely.
Nice.
Well, this is the last day of 2023.
It's so crazy.
Can you believe it?
guys.
Whoa. The year flew by.
Yeah.
And the service was a little bit on the unusual side
Yeah.
in the way we flowed the service. There were 3 messages, kinda, right?
There were.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let me ask you a question about what did you find most impactful, memorable, challenging about the whole service today?
I think just slowing down to look at communion in the broader sense.
Yeah.
We typically do it so quickly, and even though we remember when we do it, it still kind of seems like we're rushing and sometimes checking boxes when
Yeah.
we're doing it.
Yeah.
Like we don't know the actual meaning of what communion is. So like what you said, like giving it a broad example
Yeah.
of what communion is a really good output. It was
Yeah.
new for me.
Yeah. And just like how you broke it down, like you don't think about the bread that much. Like you just like it's what you're given, so that's what you eat. Like so, thinking about it that way, and like every time before you prayed, you're like, if this is something that like you're like ready for, that like to give it more of like a powerful thing, because it's a big thing, but like
Yeah.
sometimes people can be like, oh yeah, I'll just do it just because everyone else is doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
But like your heart has to be in the right place
Right.
to
Yeah.
do that.
Got-
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because I was gonna say because like when you're taught, the bread is for the body, and then the blood is the wine, and then there's just more into it with the bread and with the wine, where most people don't even understand that.
Yeah.
So that's what I really appreciate about this message was the more output of it.
Yeah, there was so much symbolism that everyone understood originally, but it's lost on us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't get a lot of the meaning that's in there. So what I just felt like I wanted to do was go, let's bring some of that meaning back into the picture so we have a greater awareness of the connection between Passover and communion and what these elements and things actually meant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's easy to do because I agree with you, Tanner. So often, and we're guilty of this, totally. We do communion almost like an afterthought.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's time to do communion. So, in between song 3 and 4, we're going to,
Yeah.
it feels rushed.
Yeah.
Rather than slow it down, remember what this is about. Make sure that the reminders that communion is supposed to give us are actually being remembered, and we're reflecting on it to be important.
And I love that you did it when you did it, like the end of this year, because then like next year and moving forward, you can be like, every time we do it, you're like, oh, this like, I gotta slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully so. So a question for you. How has your understanding of communion evolved over time as you've grown as Christians?
I think it's still evolving in my life and in my walk of faith, because I mean, I grew up in a church. I always remember my dad didn't always work in a church, but that's what I remember, that he always worked in a church, and it was just something he did, and I was just like, okay, like, my parents are doing it, so, like, I have to, like, that's just kind of like, everyone was doing it, and so it took me until, like, recently when I've actually, like, tried to be like, oh, I need to, like, be serious about all of this.
Yeah.
To when I've, like, actually been like, okay, slow down, Elizabeth, you gotta think about it. So I really like today's message because
Cool.
Yeah.
it made it even more impactful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tanner, how's your understanding of communion evolved over time, or your practice or experience of it?
Yeah. For me as a kid, I was just excited that I got grape juice in church. So, so that it's been to grow from that to start to, as I got into high school, understand, oh, this is a representation of Jesus and what he did for what he was going to do in that time, and then what he actually did for us. And then even more as you start to read more and realize, oh, I'm not even supposed to be taking communion if I'm with an unrepentant heart, or there's something I need to deal with, or looking at this as more of a actual remembrance and practice and reminder for how I go throughout my life, rather than just, oh, I get to have grape juice at church on Sunday, and I'm super excited for that.
Yeah. I mean, the grape juice is still exciting.
Yeah.
It is still exciting.
It is
That's
still
right.
exciting.
That's exactly
I
right.
always like the cracker.
Okay.
Yeah.
These ones are not
No.
very good.
Very
Really?
tasty.
No.
I've actually had worse, so I'm okay
The
with it.
styrofoam-esque crackers.
There was one occasion I remember that the juice that we passed out was like expired.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was
really
like
sour.
it was
Yeah.
not a good experience.
Yeah, it made it taste.
It didn't ferment. It just tasted
Yeah,
horrible.
it tasted actually like real wine. Then, yeah, yep.
Zach, what about you? Has your understanding or practice of communion evolved over the course of time?
It actually has. Like when I grew up I always grew up in a church home, and like my understanding was just, oh, he died on the cross. And then the body again. The bread is his body, and then the juice or wine is his blood. And then when I evolved, I'm like, oh, this is also representing that he died on the cross for our sins. And like, we are also taught that only believers in him were only allowed to do it. So they always like made sure, if you're not a believer, don't take it. And just, yeah, it involves because it shows that God died for you, and he really, like, this is his showing of love for you.
Yeah. I know the big thing when I was growing, because I grew up in church too. I hated it, but I went, right? I was one of those kids dragged to church. And it's like communion was always this somber time tacked onto the end of an evening service. We always did it at night, never in the morning. And it was all about, examining yourself to make sure that you are right with God. And that's clearly a part of what it is. But it's so much more than that. It's not just a somber time. It's a celebration. Look what Jesus did for us.
Yeah.
We're delivered and we have life. I mean, that's a reason to party. So it's got all of those elements in it, the celebration, the somberness. This is so awesome what Jesus did. Am I living in a way that reflects that I've received what Jesus has to offer? Is all part of when it went on. I remember as a little kid thinking that somehow by partaking of communion that I was like having my sins washed away. Yeah. But it's actually a recognition that it's a symbol for what can, because there's nothing about taking communion that can actually atone for any sin that any of us ever have. One of the things that I found fascinating when I was doing a little research for the message today was the whole idea of unleavened bread that hasn't been allowed to rise, no yeast in it, being a symbol for this world isn't our home. That when they ate the Passover meal, it was like, you don't have time for the bread to rise. You're moving on. This isn't your home anymore. You got to be ready to move. So as I was pondering that, here's a question that I came up with. how do you live for the world to come rather than the world that is, in practical terms? Because that's an easy phrase to say. How do you actually do that? How do you actually make sure that you're living for the world to come as opposed to the world that is? How's that work for you? Tough question.
It's a hard question.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to remember it
Yeah.
that way sometimes. Because the world can feel very overwhelming and a lot. and
Yes.
it's right in front of you. Like, it's sometimes so hard to like look past and be like, oh, but this isn't forever. Because
Yeah.
it feels
Yes.
so. I mean, it's where we're living right now. So like it obviously.
is.
Yeah. The world
But-
is taking.
No,
It's a
that is
weird
such
way
a
to
good, that's a,
think
God,
about
in fact, based on mere human observation, here's how it looks. It looks like the world is permanent and people are temporary,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the world is here, is still here. People come, people go, still have the world.
Yeah.
But the reality is the world is temporary and people are permanent.
Yeah.
And adjusting our mind so that it's not by sight, but by faith, we recognize what actually has greater value, something we need to routinely do,
Yeah.
for sure.
And then it's a hard thing to like you got to choose to remember that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Tanner, how do you live for the world to come?
I think for me, the biggest thing is remembering to slow down, kind of like we've already been talking about, but to not get so focused on, like I'm in grad school, get so focused on how I have to have this assignment done or this thing here, when I could be investing in relationships that in the long run matter way more than what I'm dealing with in that moment. Like the homework's temporary. I can get a B or a C on it. It'll be fine. But
No,
I
you
should-
can't.
and I should be focusing more on developing the relationships, doing evangelism, being involved in a church down there, just things that are going to be of more eternal significance than a grade I got sometime. So
Yeah, and that's a good. I think there's a good distinction to be made there, because everything doesn't rise and fall on one grade and one class.
yeah,
But there's a very real sense, and I know you believe this, that your training in graduate school is preparing you to be more effective at living for the world to come.
Yeah.
So it has great value because you're trying to increase the power of you so that you can leverage that power for things that actually matter most.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's like, if you ask my kids, I have a high temper. I get angry a lot so fast, and then
Wait, does that shock anybody?
Yeah.
I mean, Zach seems like this laid back kind of guy.
No.
No?
No, at home I'm like, I get frustrated a little quick, and then I'm like, all right, what would God do? What would He say? I gotta just calm yourself. Like I have to calm myself, and then take a deep breath and think, all right, what would God do or say at this time and moment? And so, yeah, it's just
And actually, that's so profound, I think, Zach, what you said right there. Because what you're doing is you're taking the moment and you're analyzing that moment from an eternal perspective.
Yep.
And I think that is a huge part of what it means to live for the world to come. Anything we can do for the glory of God.
Yeah.
Anything. And if we're actually doing it to make God look good, to help other people get a right idea of what God is like, then there is eternal significance in even the most mundane tasks of life. So it's not like they don't matter, but what matters is, why do we do it? How do we do it? How do we reflect on God, why we're doing these things? That eternal perspective, I think, is a huge part of living for the world to come, rather than just the world that is.
Because it can be like the littlest things, like how you choose to like regroup yourself. Because sometimes it feels like, oh, it just has to be like the big things, or like
Yes.
how I don't. It's
Yeah,
hard to remember to do it with the little things, but I feel like sometimes that'll help it become easier to remember.
Oh, that's so good. That's so spot on. What does the scripture say? It says, and whatever you do, do all for the glory of God. Everything. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Like, I'm shoveling the driveway or I'm driving
Yeah,
to
you
school or
are.
whatever.
yeah.
Man, how can I do this? Yeah.
I need Elizabeth to hype me up. In
Yeah.
the situation.
Hey, luckily we don't
I
have to
got
shovel
you.
the driveway so far this year.
Yeah,
It's
that's true.
The weather's completely nice.
But when we do, we'll be ready.
Oh, yeah.
We
Do
will
it.
be ready.
Honor God.
I actually, when we had our first snowstorm, I actually blamed Jenna because she actually said something about snow, and then the next day, or even that day, I think it snowed, and I was like, Jenna, you brought the snow. This is not you.
There's this false sense of there are secular things and there are spiritual things.
Yeah.
When the reality is, for a Christian, all things are spiritual.
Yeah.
Everything. Going to school is spiritual. Raising kids is spiritual. Going to work is spiritual. If I have the right mindset, doing it for the right reasons in order to make God look good and advance his purposes, all of life is spiritual. I think that's a part of living for the world to come.
Yeah.
There was, by the way, did anybody see that video I showed of the bear under the house?
Yeah,
Had you
not
seen
yet.
that before?
I had
No,
not
that
yet.
was crazy.
That was
You
Yeah.
hadn't seen that,
That
Elizabeth?
was crazy,
Well, that was-
and I would probably pee my pants if I crawled under a house and this giant bear was under there.
No,
Oh
that
my
was a
God.
big
Yeah.
bear.
It was a giant,
Yeah.
big
How
bear.
how did he get in there? How did he fit?
Bears are actually really.
How did
Is
he
it-
get out without the man coming out? Like, where was the bear?
Yeah,
Oh,
is he
yeah.
okay?
The video is actually longer, and
Okay.
I didn't put the audio in it because I was just talking over and explaining
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But after the guy crawls in there, you hear him shooting the paintball gun.
No.
There's like 4 or 5, like boom, 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 and all of a sudden, then the bear comes out, and then eventually the guy comes out after him,
Okay.
and his first words were, "That was a big bear."
It was a big bear.
Yeah.
Big bear.
It was for sure. But, the whole idea of communion being a time where we stop and we allow the Spirit of God and the Word of God to search our hearts to see if there's anything in us that's begun to grow or lodged itself that displeases God and damages us. So, how routine is this for you in your own Christian experience? How do you take time to just allow God to show you anything inside of you that might need to change or be altered? How's that work for you?
For me, it's taking time to be quiet and be by myself and kind of more just sitting in the quiet for
Okay.
it. And eventually, like, I'll probably start with prayer. I'll take some time to just sit in it. Maybe I've read some of scripture beforehand and sit on what I've been reading, but taking time to let the constant flow of I have to do this and that just fall to the wayside for a second, and that takes a long time sometimes to let that go through because everybody's got checklists they got to fill out. But
Can I stop you right there? Because I find this fascinating because I struggle with the same thing.
yeah.
How do you quiet your mind? How do you lay those things aside so that in true quietness, like internally, not just quiet around us, you can really sense or hear the Spirit of God saying things or pointing things out to you?
Yeah, for me, I think the hardest thing is, like, at first it was just, I couldn't. Like, when I first started practicing it, I would be 15 minutes and constantly things would come into my head. But more as I've done it more and more, I can kind of get to that quiet space. But it's also recognizing when a thought pops into my head and be like, oh, that's a distraction, and go, okay, I'm going to put that to the side now. Like, being recognizing that something is a distraction and pushing it off to the side has been, like, the biggest help for me. But even still now, I am a achiever. As when I was just on staff here, as many people know, I like to
Yeah.
get things done, and so if I am taking time to do nothing, that is just not my nature. So it's still taking that time to go, this is something that has value as well.
Yeah. And it's really not doing nothing.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
stop thinking about this other stuff so I can quiet my mind to hear from God.
Yeah.
Man, that's I'm just the same exact struggle. What about you? How does that work for you? How do you handle that?
I usually start my mornings off with reading the Bible. Well, actually, I don't read it. I listen to it. And then usually if I don't have enough time, I'll go to work, and then I listen to it, audio, and then I do, I have my own Christian playlist, and I listen
Okay.
to that. And then I don't know the app, but there's a bunch of Christian movies I listen to.
Okay.
Also, I'm actually in The Chosen right now, so it's really cool. Yeah.
Elizabeth, what about you?
If I'm being honest, I fell into this place of just not really doing much. And it's been very noticeable to me because it has been a lot harder. And for me, it's just, I feel like I can't stop. Because, like, my brain, it just keeps moving and I can't ever turn it off. At least that's what it feels like. And so I feel like, especially going into like this next year, I'm really bad at New Year's resolutions, but like I feel like it'll be an easy way to not start over. Like I'm not starting over, but to just start again.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it. I'm going to start again.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
I do have a question for you, Dave, since you're a runner too. Do you find that, do you run with music or do you just run with yourself?
You know, it all depends.
Okay.
Most common, podcast is going when I run.
Okay.
Second most common is I take nothing and I just think.
Yeah.
I might work an issue through. I might work a point through in a message. I might be wrestling with the concept and I just think.
Yeah.
Last for me is music. Occasionally I'll just put some music on and go, but it's usually podcast first, reflect second, and then music would be third.
Yeah. I think that for me is probably the way that I've been able to quiet my mind the most is because I run without anything because that's how we did it for training in school. But taking the thoughts captive in that sense is something that you have to do when you run all the time. So I think that's probably where I get that quiet from.
Yeah. I have found for me that in order to really quiet my heart, because read, no problem, study, no problem, say some prayers, no problem. Being quiet and listening, super hard.
Yeah.
So I find that when things pop up, when I want to just really get like more introspective and quiet and listen, that when something pops in my mind, I write it down. Like, I need to do this, I need to do that. Here's a great point, a great story. I just write it down and then put it aside. And that helps me to go, okay, I haven't forgotten about it, but I'm not going to spend any time or attention on it right now. I need to quiet myself before God so I can hear from him. Well, this has been a great discussion. Some of us have another service we need to get to, and it's about time to do that. So anyway, I hope all of you have a fantastic 2024. Perhaps you, like me, like Elizabeth said, great time to start some good things again. And I hope you will. And the 2024 is a year of tremendous blessing. You experiencing God in ways like you never had before. So Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy
See you
New
next
Year.
We'll see you next year.
See you next year.